Hey everybody, it's Jeff, and here's what I did today for Workbench, where I stream my open source innovation work on Twitch. Today was a fun project. A bit ago, my friend Dan Fessler showed me a prototype implementation of a Photoshop-like dockable pane system built as React components. Let me show you that here. Complete with a smoky pro theme and rounding corners and stuff. Still missing drag and drop and floating windows and stuff, but it's a great start and looks really cool. And you can kind of scale things around, and you've got tabs and stuff like this, and we've got so it's got the start of something. Just needs some drag and drop, some extra stuff. So I decided it'd be fun to port this to Go. Not only would it push the limits of my Proto UI framework and my experience with it, but I'd actually use it for both my big project and probably many others. So wouldn't it be cool to build Go web apps that were like Photoshop? So first I made sure it still worked, and Dan's project was well put together enough that I could just npm start into this demo. And then I started to understand how it works, just kind of like reverse engineering it and using the React Dev Tools inspector and looking at the source. And basically I was trying to figure out what components to do in what order. So I tried to figure out a path where I could port the components inside out, so their innermost components, they would probably be simpler and kind of work on their own, and then I would just kind of like build out around them. So I got started with the really simple test buttons and slider components that are actually at the core. And so I'd set up a new project in my prototypes repository. And so this meant porting the JSX to view style templates, and then re-hooking up the event handlers, that's pretty much it. Like, these aren't very complicated. They're just wrapping input. But it did make me think about how to do styling, at least to start. Like, I don't know what the state of the art is for styling in React. Dan did a lot of inline styles, and so I made a simple function to help me take a map and turn it into a style, so I can just assign a variable and bind that to the style attribute. So then it became less trivial. The next component up was a window, which is maybe more of a pane, but it's basically the actual pane that you see, including the tabs. And it used window tabs. So these tabs were actually part of it. So I had to implement both of them at the same time. Windows tab really just changes style based on its internal state of like whether it's active and whether it has a mouse over. And then if you click it, it updates its parent Windows selected state. There's a lot of this is actually where a lot of the debugging went, but that came later. So with window tab implemented but not necessarily working, I finished implementing window, except for a few problems. So it's a little bit more complicated. It has more styles, but that's not really a big deal. It doesn't really do a whole bunch, but its template is a little bit more complicated. There are a couple of bugs too that I fixed, but one of the main things was it used the index of the for loop, and I didn't support this syntax yet. I could only say tab and tabs. So that wasn't a big deal. It was actually a lot easier than I expected to implement. The React version of this template, though, if we can try and find it, here, you know, its loop is actually a map and then returning an expression, you know, of a list of those elements. And we can't really do that here. So that's why we have to do this for loop, because it's, you know, also makes sense. The problem is this for loop has to live in an element. You can already see this fragment here. So I couldn't put it in the outer one because we had these other siblings to worry about. So I put them in a div, but then the div broke the styling, and I could have made that work, but you know, there should be a solution for this. So I implemented, I mean, React calls these fragments, and I think it's like react.fragment. I ended up just making it a fragment tag. Just kind of a hard-coded thing in there that will reparent the children to the parent of that element, and that's done after all the directive parsing and stuff like that. So it actually ended up being, again, a lot of these fixes were pretty easy to put in, but I ran into a lot of bugs with other stuff along the way. So anyway, it gives you a no-op element that you need, which actually fixes, you know, a lot of stuff. There are a lot of examples in previous things where it would have been really helpful. So everything is coming together, but then all the event handlers in the window tab weren't working. So things were rendering, but the window tab, and I guess I haven't even showed this yet. Like, here is my version, right? We've got the button and we've got this, and then we have the tabs here. Now they're rendering, and at the time though, clicking them or mousing over them wouldn't do anything. They didn't change, and they also didn't look like that. I didn't realize they weren't being styled, because I spent a lot of time thinking that these handlers weren't being added, because I was looking at the I was inspecting them and seeing that their elements didn't have, they just had the style attribute. They didn't have, for some reason I was thinking that you know, Vecti was my original WASM prototype, you know, registered a callback and then set the on whatever to, you know, call into that register or whatever. Anyway, I didn't realize Vecti is calling add event listener and adding them dynamically. So they were being added. I just didn't notice because nothing was changing. And so I should have put logging in the handlers or something to see if they were firing first, but oh well. So they were assigned and firing, but I was seeing no changes. At some point, I remembered that Vecti needs you to manually tell components to re-render. Looking at all this React stuff, I kind of forgot about that aspect. So almost anything that changes state, since state isn't really a special thing in this so far, you have to call re-render manually. And so I did that, but it still wasn't working. Finally, even though I talked about it earlier, I forgot that I needed to normalize these names because I was grabbing them from their JavaScript implementation, which in React, you know, it's automatically going to put, you know, name them correctly or whatever, or apply the styles, or I don't know what it does behind the scenes. But because here I'm putting them into the style attribute, they actually need to be named like the CSS is expecting them. So that was as simple as just creating a regular expression that looks for all the upper cases and then replaces it with dash and the lowercase character. And then finally it was working. And that's not it. And so we have it. So that's just kind of a little bit. Obviously, there's a bunch more stuff to do with the paint, all the resizable things. That might actually be a little bit simpler, but I don't know. This is a fun exercise, helping to fill in the gaps in my stack and this sort of proto framework and get the experience building real components in it. And it'll be eventually really cool to have. Would it be great to have, right? This and build Go web apps. Anyway, so that's it for now. Let me know if you have thoughts or questions in the comments, and subscribe if you'd like to start following along, or join me on Twitch Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thanks for watching. Bye.